Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. I am Connie Reams, and I head up hospitality at Beekeeper. But Beekeeper is focused on not only on hospitality, but also on retail and manufacturing and healthcare. So I wanted to also with me, I wanted to introduce Arnaud, and and I'll let him say a few words here in just a second. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Please submit any questions on the chat, and we'll be happy to take those. We'll be happy to take those questions. So, just a little background on myself. I've spent my entire career in the travel and hospitality business, always on technologies that were focused on the guest-facing technologies like CRM technologies and property systems and anything that served a guest. And I would say a couple of years ago, I realized that that we spend so much time and energy focused around guest-facing technologies, but at the end of the day, it's the employees that are delivering the experience. And there wasn't a lot of new technology coming out that was really serving the employees. And that's why I decided to join Beekeeper and, really focus on that other half of the equation of, if you have happy employees, you're going to have happy customers. So that's a little bit about me. Arnaud, do you want to introduce yourself and kick off?
Sure. Thank you, Connie. My name is Arnaud. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Hyphen. And Hyphen is a company that helps organizations measure employee engagement. And, when you introduce yourself, Connie, by saying you made that switch because you thought it was important to put employees at the center of the equation. That's also why we started Hyphen in the first place. We believe employees need to be better listened to, and to feel free to express opinions so that they can feel heard and they can provide invaluable inputs to their organization, to their leadership. So let me kick things off. So this webinar is about learning, is about engaging, is about communicating. So together with Connie, we're going to go through the current state of employee engagement. We are going to discuss how to cure poor communication, especially in the deskless work. And then we're going to announce this partnership that we're very proud of between Hyphen and Beekeeper. Let me kick things off in terms of employee engagement. I'll start at a 30,000 feet view. Just in a world where unemployment is below 5%, I think I was reading recently, it's really a business imperative to attract, to onboard, to optimize and retain your employees as much as you can. Now, I think I'm talking to an audience here that has read articles, that is read about employee engagement and the Gallup studies and so on. Engaged employees, it's been proven time and time again, are more productive, are more innovative. They drive better business outcomes, better customer satisfaction. They reduce risk. For instance, better engaged nurses, leads to to better patient outcomes in the hospitals. Or in manufacturing plants, better engaged employees lead to less safety incidents, things like that. And at the end of the day, engaged employees are less likely to look for another job. So employee engagement is critical. It is a business imperative, and hence the importance of measuring it. And I will start by saying, measuring employee engagement is not just coming up with this one number. It's really understand the components of employee engagement, the drivers, the areas for improvement, even the root causes of why in certain areas it's lower than in other areas. And what we find helping organizations better understand their employee engagement at a granular level is that they stumble upon gold mine, like a gold nugget of data at all levels in the organization. Yet, I was just reading an article saying that only 53% of organizations measure employee engagement, right? Only half of companies actually make this effort. And you're going to tell me, Arnaud, that this encompasses all sorts of companies, large and small. Fair enough. So this number becomes only 70% in organizations that are 1,000 employees and higher. So you still have 30% of organizations of more than 1,000 employees that don't measure employee engagement at all. More than that, in this half of organizations that measure employee engagement, still a large portion of them use the old way, the annual satisfaction survey. And that, in a day and age where people, can switch jobs so fast, it's such an outdated way of understanding your employees, and you're going to learn things when it's too late. You're going to learn things when people have already left the organization, or issues would have bubbled up into bigger problems that potentially cause damage to the business. So it's that's from a company perspective. When you ask employees, they say the same thing. They say, my leaders do not prioritize employee engagement by and large, or my direct manager doesn't have the skill to engage me, to engage individuals, to engage teams. As we will see, this is exacerbated with workforces that are deskless, that are email-less, that are distributed, which are workforces that both Beekeeper and Hyphen focus on. All in all, this calls for change. This calls for better listening to employees. This calls for better understanding the details of why they are disengaged, why they are frustrated, why they leave organizations, and actually being able to act faster. So one of the reasons why it's super exciting to be presenting with Beekeeper today is that Beekeeper engages by communicating, and Hyphen engages by listening, and we will show you how we come together. Before we do this, Connie will tell you a little bit about this communication aspect.
Yeah, so the other half of that equation is the communication side, right? So if you want to engage your employees and have a high level of engagement, you need to be able to communicate with them. And believe it or not, if you look at this slide and you see that picture up there, folks, that's what people are still thinking about in terms of communication. The bulletin board, right? And you have no idea, when you put stuff up on a bulletin board, you have no idea if anybody's reading it. You have no idea if it got posted in a timely fashion. You're certainly not getting any feedback from a bulletin board. And so that's a real challenge. And specifically, thinking about the hospitality industry, more than 80% of the employees in this industry do not sit behind a desk, do not have a computer, and do not have a company email address. And that last fact, or I would say probably all three of those factors, are pretty much consistent across all of the industries we serve that have a lot of non-desk workers. And so, thinking about, well, how do you, if I want to put out a message today to every employee at my company or every person at my hotel or store, how do I do that? And so that's a real challenge for us. And, what's happening is that employees aren't sitting around waiting on you. They went off and they're adopting tools, right? They're finding their own tools and their own methods to communicate like they do in their private life. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But this is the real challenge today, is how do you connect the unconnected workforce? So If you would go to the next slide. I think we skipped one, no? Okay. So we'll just, yeah, so this slide just summarizes briefly what I was saying, that you've got this 80% of, non-desk workers. And in the US, that actually worldwide, that represents over 2 billion employees. So again, there's been a lot of tools created for that 20%. And actually, interestingly enough, I'm at a conference this week that's it's called HR and Hospitality, and it's filled with human resource managers. And I moderated a panel yesterday, and one of the panelists said, you put documents or information on the corporate internet to die. She's like that's what's happening with the corporate internet. And so I thought that was pretty interesting coming from an HRD.
It's what you're talking about. It's one of the huge needs that we see. It's kind of how to equip deskless and email-less workforces with technology. Hyphen is headquartered in San Francisco, so it's easy to think that every organization is, technology savvy. Everyone's sitting behind a laptop. Everyone's looking at their emails on their iPhones. But the reality is, the bulk of the global workforce, as you rightly showed on the previous slide, is, manufacturing workers, hospitality workers, retail organizations, mining organizations, energy organizations, restaurant chains, et cetera, et cetera. And what we see also is the digitalization of that workforce in their private life. They all have a mobile phone. They all have now new habits of communicating through digital tools in their personal life, and they're bringing these communication patterns to the workplace. It's funny. We work with a customer where there are lots of employee WhatsApp groups, or where people send each other SMS, etc. And that creates a risk, right? It creates inconsistency in how you're communicating and gathering feedback from your employees. It probably creates a non-compliance risk, as you were alluding to it in your slide. Basically, you can't control what's going on, but this is going to happen whether you want it or not. And so you'd rather try to control it and be able to have a say in the conversation that they're already having, and that's part of what you're doing at Beekeeper, right?
Right, exactly. So what are we trying to do together, Arnaud and myself, is really bring that kind of one-stop hub for the employees and for the employer to communicate and engage, right? And this becomes that one channel that allows you to connect with your entire workforce, allows them to connect with you, get real-time feedback, and really create a culture, an open culture, and a culture of where everybody feels inclusive, right? Break down those silos and bring everybody together. So let me just talk a little bit about what that solution looks like from the Beekeeper side. It's available. So it's a communications platform that's available via your mobile, via a mobile phone or a tablet, or in the back of the house via live streaming on video. And it allows you to put your branding on it, and it looks a whole lot. I always say, if like Facebook, WhatsApp, and LinkedIn had a baby, it would look like Beekeeper. So it's kind of this mashup, and that's really intentional. It looks like everything that they use in their private life, because we didn't want to have a necessity for any kind of training. I mean, you could pick this up after we got off and use Beekeeper. It's that simple, but it's extremely powerful. You've got a lot of analytics that tell you how communication is resonating, what's important, what's the temperature and mood of the employees, what are they thinking about. So that's a bit about how it's delivered. I would like to show you some of the most common use cases for Beekeeper. We see a lot, and we've got, as I said, we've got customers across multiple industries, but typical best use cases are things around health and safety. And again, you get you can send out, like this picture is showing, a confirmation campaign that allows you to send a note out and say, I want to confirm that you have indeed read that, and that's a confirm receipt. Other things like best practices, for example, Hyatt is using this across all of their properties in the events area to share like room setups and new recipes for events, any kind of operational, the organization around those events. They're sharing that kind of information. VIPs, so you have pictures, you can post pictures or video content so that everybody knows who your VIPs are. We just incorporated shifts, which is really exciting, that again, bringing all your users to this one platform that they are looking at to view their shift schedule, and at the same time you can push your culture information and engagement information. We also tried to take some things off of HR, the typical things that people ask for, like I forgot my password, or what's my current paycheck, what's my PTO balance, those kinds of questions we've taken off of. And then I would say finally, there's a couple. Two of my personal favorites is, one is the onboarding, where you have this automated onboarding, and we call that worker bees, that says, Connie, welcome to the company. Here's our mission and vision statement. Please take a minute to review this video. And then day 7, Connie, how was your first week at Beekeeper? And so it really ensures that everybody's getting a consistent onboarding experience, augmenting the personal side of it, okay? And my final favorite is that we see people using Beekeeper for innovation. Again, you have this 80% of the workforce that's sitting there either making the product or delivering the product. They've got tons of ideas. So we have like an online Shark Tank experience for innovation. That's very cool. So those are some of the standard are the most use cases. And so finally, what's the net result of this? Like, why do people buy Beekeeper, and why do people, realize that a tool is necessary for communication? I would say right now, the number one factor is they're trying to retain their employees. As Arnaud said, the unemployment rate is, I think in February, it dipped to 3.8%. That is just, a very difficult environment to hire and train and start with a new employee. So why not retain the employees that you have? That's the number one issue for buying Beekeeper. The other issues are certainly higher productivity, increased morale, lower absenteeism, and safety incidents are reduced.
I love it, Connie, because the words that you're using are by and large the words that we are using when describing Hyphen, but in the space of employee listening. So when you say one-stop shop for communication, we say one-stop shop for employee listening, and now we're announcing a partnership where the two one-stop shops are getting together. So it makes it even more compelling for people to have one single platform to use.
Right.
If we go on the next slide, yeah. If we go on the next slide, what we see in employee engagement, the trends, is that it's really, it needs to be simpler for all. Sending out surveys has a bad reputation. period. It has a bad reputation among HR managers, among leaders who don't get the results that they want, amongst employees that have a very poor experience. What we see is it's just technology is enabling a much simpler execution and a much simpler interpretation and distribution of the results throughout the organization. What we see also is that people are asking more frequently and throughout the employee life cycle. You mentioned onboarding, there's exit interviews, there are stay interviews, there's quarterly engagement surveys. Yes, 70% of organizations who measure are doing the annual way, but we see a wave of change with people asking twice a year or 4 times a year or even on a monthly basis, maybe not always the same questions, but really having much more of a pulse of the organization in more real time rather than once a year. We, of course, see the trend of mobility, of people having a mobile device and being able to include more of the workforce with your mobile phone, and also the employee listening being more in the flow of work. It's not anymore that one point solution that is existing by itself, but now it exists. It is integrated both in the with the HR management system in terms of the data that flows in. It is integrated in terms of the employee experience, where it's going to happen within tools like Beekeeper. And that allows to, well, collect feedback from people that you never got feedback from, or maybe you were surveying them with pen and paper before. Then on the analysis side, what we see is that there's much more intelligence, of course, in the algorithms that are being used. So much more automation and kind of doing the data crunching for you, as opposed to telling you, here's the Excel file, figure out what's interesting in that data set. No, now we can have algorithms that identify areas of improvement automatically for leaders, for managers, for HR. And technology is big into distributing this across the organization. And then last but not least, what we see is gone are the days of people saying, I'm going to do a survey just checking a box. It really is now part of a process to improve. And so planning actions downstream of a listening exercise is critical, and being able to track improvement over time. So, just like any other team, HR has become much more data-driven, and becoming data-driven, they have to demonstrate return on investment. And so doing a survey, investing time and budget and people's activity, people's actions now needs to be measured, and so progress needs to be tracked over time. So these are the trends that we're seeing, and these are the things that we're trying to do at Hyphen, where really we have developed different ways to listen to employees. The key is that it's a mobile-first experience that includes all employees, including the deskless. For instance, we work with this taqueria chain called Dos Toros. They're based out of New York and Chicago, and they had no way of listening to people who are in the restaurants, preparing food for their customers all day. And now, because they're mobile enabled, because they have mobile apps or a tool like Beekeeper, now you can reach out to people. You can reach out at the right time, at the right frequency. You can get their input, and we're getting 85% plus participation because it's mobile, because it's multi-language. So we can send a survey in Spanish, we can send a survey in English to people, and it's really integrated in their flow of work. It's intuitive. You don't have a need for a password or login. Everything's automated that way. Where really we spend the bulk of the time is on the analytics, because we know that this is whatever you collect, all this data you collect for your employees is a goldmine of data. You can you can really use it to anticipate issues in the onboarding process, in engagement, retention issues, and identifying very finely what are the segments, what are the topics that are important in your organization, comparing segments versus each other, identifying what parts of your organization seems very content and maybe has best practices that could be reused in parts of the organization that are less content and that are areas for improvement. Comparing with benchmarks, and not only stopping at the numbers, but going one step further, which is understanding the root cause. Of course, we capture a lot of text, we capture comments, we capture open text responses, and that can be also analyzed to really understand why people are discontent, why people are disengaged. What's really important is, we talked about making the life of the employee easier, the life of the managers easier in analyzing and defining actions. We also need to make this super easy for you. I assume that we have a lot of HR managers on the phone, so technology is there to help. Technology should do the heavy lifting in terms of connecting directly to your HR system to grab the data, to grab employee demographics. It should do the work for you with, we have ready-made templates so that you can start in just a few clicks, and really put employee listening in self-driving mode and give you more time back to focus on the analytics and focus on taking action. So when it comes to the partnership with Beekeeper, it's interesting because Chris, the Beekeeper CEO, and myself, we met 4 years ago, I think, at a startup pitch contest. And I was very impressed with what Beekeeper was putting together. And then last September, Beekeeper and Hyphen met again at yet another conference, and we were next to one another. And when we started chatting, we thought, oh my gosh, we want to be one-stop shops for employee engagement, but for our part of employee engagement. We are talking to the same audiences. We are very focused on deskless workers, deskless workforces, email-less employees. So wouldn't it make sense to join hands? And so the match is very natural. What we do is, there's two things that we do with Beekeeper, is that we will provision your users and their dimensions automatically from the Beekeeper profiles. So in just a few minutes, you can just sync Hyphen and Beekeeper, and we will know what are all your users and what are all their characteristics. It can be gender, location, department, cohort, tenure in the company, performance group, whatever you have loaded in Beekeeper. We can take that and then use it to automate surveys and automate analytics. And then the second thing that we do is that we are able to send an anonymous direct message to each of your employees when you launch a survey, and giving them a very seamless survey experience. So they will, as you can see in the GIF, they will open their inbox. They will see Hyphy, our little bot, inviting them to a survey. And then in Beekeeper, in the experience, the survey opens, and then it just takes a few minutes to answer, and then you're being, sent back to Beekeeper. So the beauty is that all this data is available at a granular level with analytics that are already done for you, so that you can identify early the trends, the problem areas before it's too late. You can really dissect your employee engagement number into different components. Are people engaged because of their autonomy in the workplace, because of their social connection with their peers, because of their managers, because of their leaders? You can really understand what ranks high and what ranks low, how they compare with each other, how they compare with industry benchmarks, and you can really make data-driven decisions and help your managers define very clear action plans and track progress over time. So, you know, analytics is really part of our DNA, and that's the advanced part of the surveys that we're doing with Beekeeper. It's really having access to this wealth of information so that you can go to your leaders, you can go to your CHRO, you can go to your CEO and say, this is exactly what we see, and therefore we are going to invest in such and such area. And by the way, since last year, we have seen this driver improve and this driver go down. So we need to double down on this or that initiative and really have a data-driven conversation about employee engagement.
Yeah, Arnaud, I would love to add to that, because I think that if you think about, you know, the environment that we're in today with this, again, with this low unemployment rate and this really, you know, challenging time, for everybody on the call, you've got, you know, more welcoming ears within your organization that will listen to exactly what your findings are coming from, right? Used to be your survey, your annual survey, then you would spend like, you know, 3 months figuring out what to do with that data, and then you would try to start implementing something. This is meant that this is completely turning that upside down and really being, you know, in a more real-time manner, you know, knowing and taking actions and not, you know, waiting. And as I said, you've got a much more receptive audience that understands. I mean, in the hospitality world, we know that if engagement's going down, then you're going to have higher turnover. And guess what happens? TripAdvisor scores go down. And every 10th of a TripAdvisor score is, it's a lot of zeros. And so there's just a whole bunch of, you know, bottom line financial predictions that you can make from this kind of data too. So it's really, it really changes that the way that you assess and engage your employees in this kind of, you know, real-time way that we're bringing to the table. We've seen
I like to compare it with, I mean, some of the tools that other teams have been lucky to use for the past 10 years, right? So the sales team is using Salesforce.com, right? They have all their leads, all their contacts, all their information, all their opportunities, and they can, you know, they can make data-driven decision at every level in the organization. The VP of sales can make data-driven decision. The sales manager, the account executives can make data-driven decisions. But up until now, HR has been, you know, a little bit at a loss, I think, to collect all this data in one single place. Whether it is, by the way, whether it is engagement, but also diversity and inclusion, training feedback, and onboarding and candidate feedback, all sorts of inputs from people throughout the employee life cycle, put it under one roof, and then doing a ton of analytics to be able to make the right decisions and see the right business outcomes, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. So this this last slide here just shows some of our customers, and from the Beekeeper side, we are, as I said, we're in hospitality, manufacturing, retail, healthcare, and you see some logos up there. I'll maybe pick on Mandarin Oriental, for example, has about 35 hotels across the world, and that's really allowed them to create a company that every employee, you know, whether I work in Barcelona or I work in New York, I'm connected to my fellow employees and colleagues across the world. And that's really, again, very powerful. So from our side, we're, you know, whether this is not a luxury, you know, some people say, is this a luxury hotel issue? It's not. It's we have a lot of Hiltons, a lot of Marriott Courtyards. We have extended stays. and it's really the same issue. I mean, communication and engagement isn't, you can't pigeonhole it into one type of, particular problem for one particular audience. It's anywhere you've got a lot of non-desk workers, that's where we see the real need for something like Beekeeper and Hyphen. Arnaud, you want to touch on any of your customers?
I think it's just, these customers are just a subset that are echoing what we discussed, whether you're a tech area chain or you're a home care, healthcare organization, or you're a food and bev chain, or a manufacturing organization that does brakes for trains, or a dental insurance organization. All of these have, as you said, maybe not exactly 80%, plus or minus 80% of their workforce that are deskless, email-less, and it's working with us has really changed the way they are getting input. I'm going to give maybe one example. We work with a company called Titan that does they sell luxury sunglasses and watches, and they have a lot of people in stores, and they had never been able to get any feedback from people in stores. And so for the first time with Hyphen, because we focus so much on deskless employees, they've been able to learn things and to make pretty decisive decisions. I know that a store has been closed because of the feedback that they were getting on how the store was performing, on how the behavior of people, and they were able to optimize their network in a way that was beneficial to both employees and the organization. So real decisions yielded from an employee listening exercise.
Great. Well, listen, we're going to kick off some questions. So please post your questions in the chat. We have our first one here. It says, is it by purpose or accident that you both have the same key color in your logos? So I'm going to take it as flattery that Arnaud used our color. No, I'm teasing. I think it's accident, right? I from our side, I know it's accident, and I really didn't notice that until I saw them side by side, how similar, and if not the same coloring. So I'm going to call that as an accident for sure.
I think teal is hot.
Okay, so how do we get started with people analytics to retain our top talent?
You want me to take that?
Yeah, I'm going to pass that to you, Arnaud.
Well, I'll come back to what I discussed earlier, which is understanding the drivers of engagement, understanding why people are even looking to get out of your organization, right? And doing a baseline engagement survey will give you insight into this. It will tell you these are the categories, these are the questions where people are very satisfied, they're very favorable, and these are the categories where they're less favorable. You compare that internally, you compare that with your benchmarks, and you're able to really understand where you're doing less well than other organizations or less well than other teams, and getting a pretty good understanding of what are the reasons why people are starting to look outside. And then you can do some more targeted surveys on that topic in particular, or that employee segment in particular. You can also analyze exit survey results, because who better than the people who are leaving voluntarily, after the fact, after all the last paycheck has been paid and all that, you can ask them, why is it that you left? Be honest with us. And you can automate this feedback through a tool like Hyphen, and really understand and probably confirm some of the assumptions that you develop from your employee engagement survey. So these are some ideas to start with. And of course, there's nothing that replaces real life conversations. I will never claim that, technology will do all the job for you. But once you develop these assumptions and that you get this hard data from surveys, from employee feedback, now you can go talk to people, you can go talk to managers, you can even do some focus groups, whether they are real life or virtual, and validate them, and then put some actions in place to remedy.
Great, great. Next question, it comes up all the time. How do you feel about employees bringing their personal cell phone to work? So I guess I'll take that one, because that's one of the top 3 questions that we always get. And I'm going to answer that actually based on, again, I think I told you earlier in the call that I'm actually at a conference here in Las Vegas, and there's about 300 human resources directors here, or CHROs. And the general sentiment around this topic is they're already bringing their phones to work. They're already using them to communicate with each other. And why not have them use and adopt a technology and a channel that is your own versus them using a channel that's not yours? Whether you have union concerns or non-union concerns, or data privacy concerns, bringing all of that communication onto a channel that you control and that you have visibility into is the general consensus, is that's where companies should be. So I think that's a great. Somebody laughingly made a joke yesterday of 10 years ago, if you had a tattoo, you had to wear a band to cover up your tattoo. And nowadays, in some certain brands, they actually look for people with visible tattoos. So we've, things change. We didn't really embrace the cell phone change, and until I would say in the last couple of years, we've seen a huge shift in that. All right, next question is, could you reduce employee fluctuation by...
I'm going to try to address this, and Daniel said maybe labor turnover is the better word. Well, I think we addressed that also in the retention question. But something that comes to mind is, there are probably employees that you care more about. Either they are the top performers or they are in critical jobs. And in these areas, you want to really focus on them. You really want to know exactly what to do to retain this subsegment of employees. So that's another powerful thing when you have data, such as in Beekeeper and Hyphen, then you can really filter, right? And you can focus. So we have customers that actually filter their survey results for top performers, average performers, and low performers. And this is data that comes directly from the HRIS system that's connected with their performance management system. And understand, are there issues that are particular to my top performers in the engineering team on the West Coast? Are there issues that are particular to average performers in the marketing team in the Midwest? So you can do this very fine analysis, and chances are different functions, different departments, different levels of seniority, and different performance level will have different sensitivities and will have different drivers of engagement. So having the data, being able to slice and dice, will allow you to zero in on exactly what matters to which group of employees, including the employees that count the most for you. So I'm not sure if this answers exactly your question, but that's something that came to mind when I read employee turnover and fluctuation.
And I would just like to add on to that, Arnaud, that, and I'm sure you've seen we were rolling out Beekeeper at a Hilton property in Dallas, and we actually had once we got everybody on to Beekeeper, we had a housekeeper who wrote on the chat message, and she was sitting there and she had tears coming out of her eyes, and she wrote on the chat message, "This is the first time I've ever been able to communicate with my employer." She was a Vietnamese housekeeper and had been employed there for over 8 years. So think about taking that barrier down.
Yeah.
And what that, yeah. Okay, so next question, Arnaud, it's for you. How many surveys do you see companies normally conducting? I guess a frequency kind of question.
Yeah, there's the jury's still out. I'll tell you what I think. You know, I just talked to a very large, one of the biggest banks in the world that is doing an employee survey only once every 2 years, and this is not enough because in 2 years, you know, you have a large portion of your people who have changed jobs, and so the data that you're getting is already very old. As we said during this webinar, the annual survey is kind of old school and is not often enough, given, you know, the liquid state of the of the job market right now. What we're seeing more of is quarterly, right? And I think it's good because it's the right trade-off between listening often enough and also giving yourself, the HR team, enough time, and giving the business managers enough time to take action, to actually change things, and then giving some time for employees to digest that, to live the change, and then 3 months later to express themselves again, and for you to be able to track the data. If you were to measure on a weekly basis, even on a monthly basis, maybe that's too often because you don't give people the enough time to affect and to fix situations. It does depend on your company culture. So some organizations, you know, you need to start somewhere. I think if you don't do any listening, start at the annual at least, to get that into your CEOs and your board's brain that employee engagement matters, and it should be a data point on their dashboard. But then I would encourage you to go a little bit more frequent, maybe starting every 6 months and then going to the once every quarter, which is to me the ideal trade-off between having more real-time data, but also ensuring that people have enough time to take action.
Great. Next question's for you as well, Arnaud. What percentage can be considered as a good percentage of participation for a survey or in a survey?
That's a great question. That, again, depends on organizations, depends on your industry. Scientifically speaking, mathematically speaking, and I know this is being recorded. I was going to say never repeat what I just say. If you get to 55% respondents in a survey, you're likely to have results that are statistically significant, that mean something and that represent the voice of employees. But there's also a visual aspect. You know, if you show up, if the CEO shows up and says, "Great news, we've reached 55% participation on our survey," chances are some people will laugh and say this is not enough, and that by itself is an indicator that that the survey, that the employee and the workforce is not engaged, which is a true thing. I think the right number is 85% to shoot for. We have organizations that are consistently hitting 95%, fantastic culture, everybody's super engaged and willing to share feedback. But yet again, you know, it's only exceptional cultures that can get to this number. Somewhere between 75 and 85 being the number you should shoot for is what I would recommend, and is very impressive. when you have 75 to 85%, you should feel comfortable to show this data in front of anyone and say the data is strong and the workforce is engaged, and it's a number that you can be proud of.
Great. Other questions? We have one here for Beekeeper, and it is a question that, let me just read it here. It says, what has been the situation with connecting and allowing all employees to communicate, openly? And so generally, that's an interesting question, because people are afraid if they put this channel out there, they're afraid of what they might get back, right? And it's an open forum. But what we've seen is some companies have started with, allowing postings, but not commentary back. But really that goes away really fast, because, and I'll take an example, Fairmont Hotel Group, 45,000 employees across the world, went live, and that's been about 4 years ago. And they left the channel wide open so that people could comment, and that was the kind of culture the kind of shift they wanted in their culture. They wanted people's feedback to be heard, and they wanted people to, really understand that was the shift that they were taking in their culture. And it was pretty amazing. If I were to share the statistics of their annual engagement survey at that time of the changes, they shared their results year over year with us. And, in terms of feeling like they were engaged, they could perform their job better, they knew what their company's direction was, and they felt a part of the company. These results were amazing. So, okay, we have another question here. How do you help with going beyond scores? I see from your website that you help with sentiment analysis. Do you do this for comments? Or no?
Yeah, that's a recurring pain point especially for large organizations, right? If you have 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 plus employees, and you multiply that by the number of open questions or optional comments that you let people write in a survey, suddenly, you have an Excel file of 20,000 comments. And I am very regularly speaking to people who said, I just spent my weekend going through, thousands of comments and highlighting in yellow the ones that are important, that I should follow up with. Technology helps. There are techniques now to analyze text, to categorize text. So to read between the lines, so to say, and to know, okay, this comment is talking about work-life balance. This comment is talking about leadership. This comment is talking about social connection in the workplace. And this comment is talking about pay and benefits. And then, so you can do that. And then the second thing is you can categorize in terms of sentiment. So is this comment rather positive? Is this comment neutral? Is this comment negative? So suddenly, technology helps you put these 10,000 plus comments that you have in a very simple matrix, right? By topic and by sentiment. And you can much faster, I would say, focus on the ones that matter. You can focus on the most negative. You can focus on the topics that matter to your organization as per the survey results. And suddenly you have only 100 comments to read, but these are the 100 comments that count. So I think that's, again, an area where a tool like Hyphen can help you, one, save time, but also bring tremendous value and focus to the organization.
Excellent. Any last minute questions? All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for your time. If you want to reach us, I think you've got our, you can reach out to Arnaud or myself, or come in through our websites. But we would love to hear from you, and certainly answer any other further questions you may have specific to your organizations.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you as well. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.